Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. It's Monday night, and you know what this is. WeatherBrains, the pre-show, the magical part of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. Episode number 753 for June the 22nd, right around the summer solstice. So after this time, the amount of daylight begins to grow shorter. What's really weird, I kind of like that. I mean, in my older age, I'm more of a winter guy. You know, when I was like young, I loved summer. I lived for the summer. But now I'm more of a winter guy. So now we're over the top and we're cruising down toward the winter solstice, a few days before Christmas. All right, so let's see here what we got. Got the embed code loaded, so now we can bring the guests on here. We're having a good day. All right, so here we go. Invite. We're going to invite by email. And we'll see who we can find to join us on this fine Monday evening. Let's bring in Bill Murray. He's our guest booking officer. I think Nate is out tonight. Nate said he has an OS upgrade in progress. Maybe he's loading up the new version of Mac OS. They had WWDC today out in California. And all the new operating systems were announced. They will be available to the public in September. But if you have a developer's license, they are available right now. But it's a beta 1. Do you have the guts? I never have the guts to do that on a production machine. I think that's insanity to do that. I'll typically grab the oldest device I've got in a drawer. Somewhere in my drawer, I've got an old phone or something, and I'll put the first beta on that. And then as it gets stable after version 2 or 3, we'll put it on another one and another one. And before you know it, we'll have it on everything. But it looks pretty good. And Apple's very polarizing. Some people love their products. Some people hate them. I use them because of the reliability. I've said this many times before. I'm not really an Apple fanboy. I'm a fanboy of stuff that works. And time is precious to me. And I don't have time to be constantly fiddling around with computers and doodads. And, years ago, that was fine. But I just got to have something that works, man. And typically their stuff does. Not always, but typically it does. And so anyway, that's the deal. All right, let's see if anybody else wants to join us. And I hope we're not on Google Meet tonight. Because if we are, I probably should read my notes. This is what I do. To prep for this show, I read the show notes 9 minutes before airtime. We have an MIC of the National Weather Service. You know what that means. We might have to Google Meet it, and Google Meet and Zoom screen share. If I had hair, it would be removed. Jen, do we need to do Google Meet tonight? Do you know?
Oh, you know what? I don't know.
Because I notice our guest is the MIC at the National Weather Service in San Diego.
Maybe.
They, and I'm seeing somebody with AccuWeather, and then somebody that's with the local EMA office in Atlanta. So they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe our friend with the Weather Service can just not tell anybody.
Yeah, that works.
Forget that big logo that's on the live stream. It says Zoom.
Exactly.
Forget that. We were just kidding. We just did that to see if anybody was noticing.
Exactly. Oh, here comes the guy who'll know.
Yeah, he will know all. The GBO, guest booking officer.
What would you like to know?
Did, is this a Google Meet or a Zoom?
Assume.
Oh, good. My heart is
Awesome.
warm.
Yeah, I would have warned you. Yeah, Tom or Matt is weather service, but he's going to do it from his private account.
Okay. Ooh,
Yeah,
my heart
there's
is warm
that.
and fuzzy.
Yeah, me too.
We like it when James's heart is warm and fuzzy.
So,
Right.
can we announce this thing you've been negotiating here, Bill? Is that public knowledge, or do we need to
Yeah,
sit
it
on that?
is. No, I think we can announce it now. That's really cool. I just hope he'll play his harmonica.
So, and most of the younger people watching this will have no idea who these people are.
But he's very significant. He's a,
Oh
Well,
yeah, I mean,
you got,
he's
got my
kind of a
curiosity
big,
up.
kind of a big deal.
he is the greatest Southern rocker from Alabama.
Oh,
There's a guy by the name of, you're talking about JH, right? His initials are JH.
That's correct.
Yeah. So there's a guy from Mobile, Alabama. He had a band back in the 1970s called Wet Willie.
And still
And
does.
Jen, this was way before your time. Uh, but they had a lot of really big commercial radio hits. One was called "Keep on Smiling"
mm-hmm.
Their
and
biggest,
"Weekend."
which
And
is
anyway,
probably still played the most today.
they're going to come on our show. I mean,
Oh, cool. That's
so
awesome.
But
Well, I'm
you
gonna
know,
have to check
last night, I want my Father's Day present was the American Film Institute documentary film festival, which we watched all weekend from starting Wednesday night. And James, you would have loved it. Last night was the closing film was Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President. And I had no idea that President Carter enlisted the help of Capricorn Records, which
ooh,
was the Allman Brothers, Marshall
yeah,
Tucker.
Macon, Georgia. He's
Yeah.
based in Macon.
And the guy is best friends with JH. And they did all sorts of benefit concerts, and because of the federal matching, they could have a concert in Providence, Rhode Island on a Tuesday night and turn around and be running TV ads in Pennsylvania on Friday. And those people, Greg Allman and Bob Dylan and all those, probably won that election for Jimmy Carter because he was,
Wow.
he, number one, they were raising money for him right and left. And two, they legitimized him as a candidate because young people gravitated to him because he must be cool if, Charlie Daniels and the Marshall Tucker band and all these people were, supporting him. And I was oblivious as much as I loved current events when I was a kid, and was a news junkie. I somehow missed that entire element of President Carter's history, and I think that's going to be fascinating to get our subjects' take on all of that history, and plus just to hear his take on all those famous people.
No, this is cool. I'm
That's
excited,
awesome.
man. This is
And he won't be the
good
whole
stuff.
show. Although we might decide he's going to be the whole show at some point. It's going to be the first 15, 20 minutes of the show that night. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So that was the soundtrack of my life as a teenager,
Oh yeah,
playing rock and roll music on the radio.
that I love that song. "Keep on Smiling" was just a spectacular song.
I'm sure I've heard it. I'm sure.
Oh, you have.
Yeah.
And Weekend, everybody in the universe has probably heard it. That's how this show happened because I pulled a line out of that in my weather forecast a couple of Sundays or a couple of, I don't know when it was. I looking out to the weekend. I just pulled a line out of that song and put it in the text of the forecast. And their band's publicity director reached out and said, "Thank you for mentioning the band."
That's cool.
And I was like, "Why don't y'all come on the show?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they and JH is doing a, you know, I don't know, when can I say it, James? I guess I can say it. Mr. Hall, Jimmy Hall, one of our heroes, is has just done a remake of this song, or whatever you would say, with Blackberry Smokes, and that song's just being released on their new album, and that's what we're going to be able to play some of that, and we have the rights to do that without being
we're not going to be thrown in jail.
Right. We have
Of course,
actual
the problem, problem is these algorithms do it anyway. I mean, then you have to appeal and prove
that's
it.
terrible. Yeah.
No, but if we have documentation, we can prove it.
We can prove it. We'll get our day in court.
Yeah, we'll sue them. We're a litigious society.
So when is that? When's what episode?
July 6th.
Okay, cool.
This is a a legend in Southern rock. Because he's a famous Southern rocker. And, those people were amazing. Right. The Allman Brothers, Leonard Skinner, Marshall Tucker, Charlie Daniels. That was the first concert I ever went to, James, with Charlie Daniels.
I got a great Charlie Daniels story. So Charlie, yeah, I'll wait and tell on the show. It's a good one.
You better mind.
So Aubrey is out tonight. Just got a note from her. She's been on vacation. This is her first day back, and they've switched to a new web server today, and it's mass chaos in Harrisonburg. So she's out. Nate is out installing an operating system on a computer. Come on, Nate. What are you going to do? You're going to install a stinking OS. You're going to update the kernel, defrag the hard drive. Or do you want to be on WeatherBrains? I mean, come on. I mean, there should be no choice there.
I think everybody's tired. It's been a long run. James, here about 3 months or 4 months. We've had almost everybody every night. So.
Yeah. So Tom, can you hear us okay?
I can. You guys activated the video just as I was testing my audio. So all the terrible things that I was saying to test it, I'm glad you did not hear. So I haven't committed any faux pas yet.
The night's still early.
That's right.
Yeah.
We do that often.
Yeah, this show is one big faux pas here. Trying to admit everybody so nobody's in Zoom Hades in the waiting room.
Zoom purgatory. Oh, there's Matt.
There's Matt.
Shane.
Hey, everybody.
We got a whole contingent.
The gang is all here. We can actually start.
You're in charge of the show, right, Jen? Isn't that right? You're in charge of it. Didn't I get that note?
Is that what it is? I don't think me and the boys.
So where's Troy? Is he out this week? Troy's always here.
He's big dogging us now that he's been on Marshall.
Yeah, I'm kind of a big deal. I have many leather-bound books in my apartment. It smells of rich mahogany.
I don't know. I might have scared him away when I mentioned both Tom and Matt were going to be on the show.
Maybe he ran. He ran.
Flock of seagulls.
And I don't see Kim, but if they join us, they join us. So we'll get this sucker started here. All right, channel 1 and channel 2. Thank you all for doing Zoom. When I have to do Google Meet, it's a convoluted mess because you can't stream to YouTube directly from Google Meet, which makes no sense because it's a Google product. Anyway, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's WeatherBrains, the weekly show that's all about weather. This is episode number 753, and this is for June 22nd, 2020, the year that never ends. Well, we're past the summer solstice. That's got to mean something, Jen. What does it mean? It means our amount of daylight's going to be shrinking up here.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it is. I was looking outside yesterday. I'm like, man, it is definitely light out. What was 9:40? It was so light here in Ohio.
Yeah.
So
saw a great photograph from the Weather Service in Fairbanks of this amazing rainbow at 12:30 a.m. yesterday. Just, the land of the midnight sun. But yeah, and again, when I was talking about this in the pre-show, I've developed as an old man into a winter guy for some reason. So for me, I celebrate the solstice knowing that now we're on the downhill slope toward winter. So, and really fall for a long time. And I still love fall. It's great. But I don't know, old men just like cold for some reason. Bill, are you a cold weather guy?
I didn't used to be, but I think I'm becoming, I don't know. I used to love the hot weather when I was a kid, but now I think I'm starting to appreciate cold weather even more as I get older. You think it should be the other way around, shouldn't it? I should gravitate toward warm weather as I get older.
I don't know. But bring it up again. Let's start this show, Bill. We've got a lot of, let me just say, we got a lot of our folks out this week. But that's okay. The important ones are here tonight. So let's roll it.
More room for the guests. Yeah. Weather Brain number one is really the brains behind the show tonight. He's the emergency management specialist with the Atlanta Fulton County EMA. Been in Atlanta for 5 years now. Chair of the International Association of Emergency Managers, Emerging Technologies Committee. Member of the AMS NWA. Shane Sparagowski, welcome back to Weather Brains.
It's good to be here. It's crazy to think about how much has happened since last time I was on here. It was only a few months ago.
And that seems like it was like a century ago.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta, we've had snow. We've, had a pandemic. We canceled the Final Four, which we were talking about last time. We've had the protests. It's been a little bit of everything. It's definitely keeping me busy.
Well, I mean, how many days has your EOC been activated now? Where are you at? That's got to be terrible.
104 days now.
104 days. Oh my goodness. Well, tonight we'll talk about all that a little bit, but we'll kind of not worry about that for a little bit and talk about weather and have fun. But thank you for being a big part of this show tonight, making it happen, Shane. We appreciate it. And guess what? The brain number two is the meteorologist in charge of National Weather Service San Diego. Been in that role since October 2017. He was the MIC in Key West for Irma when we talked to him last. Before that, he was in New Orleans, Houston, and Galveston for a long time. He's a graduate of the University of Oklahoma, native of Houston, Texas. Matt Moreland, welcome back to Weather Brains.
Thanks. It's good to be back. It seems like I cycle every 3 years, so.
Show right title.
Yeah. Well, you can cycle with us every 3 years, and that'll be just fine with us, as long as it doesn't have to be after a big event. Maybe you'll be isolated from some big events for a while in San Diego.
Yeah, since I've been out here, really our big issue's been the burn scars and debris flow issue, which I know, everybody knows about the Montecito event that happened near LA, but it's not a new area of meteorology, but as far as like how we message it to our partners, very, very, very challenging. So, but of course, there's always the risk of fires out here too. So that's what we worry about, especially as we head toward the fall.
Yeah, you've had some big fires in the last few years for sure, and
they
seem to be getting worse. I got to go back and say hello to Troy Kimmel. Troy,
hey,
how are
everybody.
You?
Doing fine. Matt, Shane,
good to see you, Troy.
And Bill and Jennifer.
Been a while.
And who's the other guy, James Spann? Okay.
Yeah. Who? Yeah, he's just the guy that puts on this soiree every week. So it's good to see your face, Troy. No, don't be.
We got Kim. Kim's here.
I know. I was going to welcome Dr. Kim Cloco McLean coming to us from Norman, Oklahoma. Kim, how are you tonight?
Doing wonderfully. It's great to be with you all, and I am so excited to see so many wonderful, friendly faces. This is going to be a great show. I am just so pumped. It's a fun set of topics, great people. I'm just grateful to be here.
Well, we're grateful you're here too. So thank you for joining and being part of the show tonight, Kim. We're so excited.
Fine people, Bill. Who else is going to be on the show? No, I'm just kidding.
Who came in?
Yeah, really.
Yeah,
we love
y'all. y'all take your shots anytime you want, guys. That's y'all can get him back anytime you want. But the third guest, WeatherBrains, a meteorologist and an implementation manager at AccuWeather Enterprise Solutions in Wichita. Tom Bedard, welcome to the show. Tom, it's so great to meet you.
It's great to meet you guys as well. I've been listening for a long time. I'm really excited to get to talk with you all live on the show tonight. It is the most exciting Monday night that I think I can say I've had in months. But when every single night is spent inside, it's a hard comparison, but I'm happy to be with you guys.
Well, given that there's been a stay-in-home order for the last 3 months, we'll take it.
I like that the standard was set at, given that life has been pretty much just awful.
Yeah. The bar has been pretty low the last 3 months.
we rate marginally above like mildew on tile.
Yeah.
I got something else to do besides Netflix tonight. This is great.
Yeah, you probably run out of everything on Netflix. I know there's a new movie about a hijacking. I think that's one thing I haven't seen yet, Matt. But maybe we can catch it. But Matt, you were saying about fires and all these things. So I noticed an interesting survey that you guys had done. Do people prefer the gloom or the sun in San Diego? And the results were sort of surprising.
Yeah, we actually ended up with, I think, almost 70 or 80% voted for the gloom. So they have this, it's May gray, June gloom phenomenon where the low clouds hang in well into the afternoon. Since I've been out here, which is 3 Mays and Junes now, I've always said, oh, it's overrated. The sun still comes out a lot. But then the last week in San Diego, it's been really overcast. I think today we had a little more clearing, but for me, we're living in Texas and Oklahoma and Florida most of my life. I just absolutely love the cool summer weather, so I will never complain about it.
Yeah, it's gotta be nice for that morning run or whatever to get out and get out and exercise in that nice, cool environment. I've been able to come to a few conferences that were down by the Gaslight District, and that's always nice to enjoy that. So talk about the meteorological process that causes that, Matt, for people that aren't familiar.
Well, it tends to be amplified when we get, when you get like a strong upper ridge over the southwest. So and that's what we have in place this week. So our desert area, so you have Palm Springs, which is a 2-hour drive from San Diego. And it's going to be topping out probably 110 tomorrow, most likely. Some of our mountain locations, so much higher elevations, will be up around 90. But when we get into these upper ridge patterns persistent in the summer like that, it will actually enhance the marine. It makes it tougher for the marine layer to break up. So you'll have the total opposite weather happening, and the beaches will stay cloudy and maybe in the 60s all day. A lot of times we can get a weak eddy that forms offshore that'll help kind of reinforce the low cloud cover along the coast as well. Once we get into July, it starts to break up a little more readily, even in the coastal areas as we get into July and August.
So Matt, are you going to miss tropical cyclones? I mean, they're mainly going to be just streaming by you there. Hopefully not many of them will make a right turn into where you are, I guess.
I worked so many of them in the past that I really wanted a change of pace. That was a big driver for coming out here, was I want to deal with some different threats outside of tropical cyclones, but we still have actually a very low risk out here. We get affected by remnants every couple years, but we actually do have a very low threat, but obviously it's much lower than the Gulf and the Atlantic.
Matt, come on, man. I mean, you and I've talked over dinner. You mean you don't like being held up in the Key West WFO for like a week and a half?
And sleeping on the floor, Sure.
So was Irma your most memorable, or would you say Ike? What would rate up there, man?
I always say that Irma was number 1 and Ike was number 2 on my list. And I've got Tropical Storm Allison up there, which hit Houston in 2001. Very memorable for Texans. that was topped by Harvey, which I wasn't there for, but a lot of my family was affected.
Yeah, Allison was sort of a deja vu moment for at least the rain part of Harvey, I guess. But
yeah, I think Allison is still down as the #1 costliest tropical storm. Troy probably knows for sure.
Now,
but
wasn't and Allison helped me out because, Matt, I can't remember yesterday. That's what happens. You get to be 63 years old. I don't remember yesterday. So, but Allison's the one who did the double loop, went up to Lufkin and came back, right? And then
that's
back
right.
up.
Yeah, it made landfall on a Tuesday, produced flooding in Houston area, went inland for 3 days, came back, and when it came back south is when the real catastrophic flooding occurred.
Now, see, I remember Alicia, which none of y'all do because none of you are alive.
Yeah.
It was just James Spann and myself, and maybe a very youthful Bill Murray. So
I won't even tell you what grade I was in when Allison hit.
Okay.
Yeah, you weren't even a twinkle in your parents' eyes for Alicia, Shane.
I am feeling old now.
I do, that was, this, to me, that would have been 81, right? Troy would have been Alicia. Was that right? 81 or 83? 83, maybe.
Maybe it was 83. You're right.
Because,
it was 83.
you were so enamored with the Weather Channel and John Hope and getting your information that way back then.
And I was doing TV weather in Bryan College Station, KBTX then. So it came up toward Bryan College Station way, a little east of there. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I was telling James and Jim before the show, this was the AFI documentary film festival this weekend. Several great films. One of them produced by Ron Howard. Opie made a great film about rebuilding the town of Paradise, California. We've talked about that wildfire a couple times. And what a heart-wrenching story. Not only just the disaster itself, but then the disaster that's rolled on since then, of rebuilding that town, and how hard it's been on those people. It was really shocking. Anything you want to throw in about that? I know that's not y'all's area, but maybe y'all have run into some experiences relating to that. Kim's nodding her head. Has anybody got any stories or anything that relate back to the Paradise event? It was so shocking to me. I looked at Elle and said, this is 10 o'clock in the morning. It was pitch dark. That pyrocumulus was so big. Matt, that's a scary thing, and y'all deal with that.
What it makes me think of is towns in Southern California, like Big Bear is one good example, where it's in the San Bernardino Mountains, very popular getaway for LA and San Diego. In the winter, I've been there only in the winter and during a snow event, and it was bumper to bumper traffic. It's 2-lane highway getting in and out, windy road. And Idlewild, which is another mountain getaway for both cities, they were almost affected by the Cranston fire, which was about an 18,000 acre fire that we had 2 summers ago. And they managed to keep the fire line right outside of Idlewild. But the thing that happened in Paradise could easily be a scenario down here. And I know there's a lot of work a lot of discussion in California on alerting the fires themselves. I know like in Oklahoma and Texas Panhandle, they do like the fire warnings. And I know the Weather Service distributes those as well. And there's discussion in California. What about real-time alerts similar to that? And also the utility companies out here are all really spinning up meteorology departments and installing lots of instrumentation in those vulnerable areas. The San Diego SDG&E, San Diego Gas and Electric, was really the leader in that area. They spun up their meteorology program following the 2007 fires down here, and they've installed hundreds of weather observation sites around the area, and that enables us to track the winds and track those critical conditions as they're developing. But I know all the all the utilities throughout California are working on that now, which is great.
We talked to a forester a few months ago that really was talking about prescribed burns and how critical those are, but how difficult they are to do. And on the film, in the Ron Howard film, they showed the forester out there with the sling psychrometer, getting the temperature and the humidity to, right before they started a prescribed burn. But there's no way they can do enough, it seems, to get rid of all the fuel that you would have to in a given year, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just starts, we get most of our rain in winter and spring, and the last 2 winters have been pretty generous here in Southern California, above normal precip. But then, once you get into May, June, it starts drying out quickly. And what's interesting is the last 2 big fires in our warning area were both in the summer. So, everybody thinks about Santa Ana season and everything, which tends to be most impactful in October as far as fire risk, October, November. But we've even had these big fires in lighter wind regimes when it was just hot and dry.
So this is all just scary. Now, Shane, I know you've talked about on the emerging technology side some kind of dream things, where we could warn people better. Is there any cool new stuff, any news on the horizon relating to any of that?
Well, not a whole
that
lot.
We could kind of hope for or look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot on the near term, but we're still trying to work with Google. They already aggregate that data on their website. It wouldn't be hard to aggregate it into smart devices and things like that. And working with a lot of these other companies to try to get that to happen. One thing that is coming out, though, actually very, very near term, though, is the 360 characters on the WEA messages for weather service related things. So that's a huge deal right there.
That's really cool. So that's where are we at in that process right now, and how's that going?
Well, I don't know exactly when it's going to roll out, but it's real soon. I just saw an email last week. I believe it may be within the next month, if it hadn't already rolled out.
Tom, we got you here tonight because we want to talk about the EM role in the committee and the AMS. Talk about the committee for a minute. What's its role, and what is its activity right now? What are you guys doing? I know you guys got a lot of things going on.
I'd be happy to. So when we started in 2014, the main goal of the committee was to bring emergency managers to the table within the AMS. There is this incredible intersection that exists between public safety and meteorology that all of you know so well. But prior to 2014, Bob Goldhammer, to him, it wasn't clear that link was well represented at the conferences. So we steadily grew since 2014. Every year we've done a little bit more. We've always really heavily focused on engaging students and making sure that meteorology students who want to know more about emergency management have avenues of doing that. And so at the conference, we have this incredible integrated warning team, kind of mock tabletop exercise where we have 100 students and we run them all through some relative or relevant event in the area. And it's cool because they get to sit with a local fire chief, a local emergency manager, a broadcaster from the Weather Channel, and you get to have this one-on-one conversation with professionals who have been in the field for decades. And so we've always really cared a lot about student engagement because you're finding a lot more meteorology students graduating who have been firefighters, who have been EMTs, who have worked in police or private military, who want to become emergency managers with that dual background. And so we focused on that. And coming into 2020, as I hand the reins off to Matt next year, I wanted to end on a high note. So we had these grand plans for all these different committees we were going to work with, all these different agencies we were going to partner with. And then a pandemic allegedly came out of nowhere and we pivoted. So we started issuing a best practice on tornado sheltering during COVID-19 that might have been one of the fastest statements that AMS has taken and then put in force. Thanks to, I think, some fantastic review by the AMS Council, who were willing to take our work, deviate from their own lives and put it up as a statement in force. Now we're working on another statement just inside of our committee on hurricane sheltering. We've done webinars. We've done engagement with American healthcare emergency preparedness professionals. So, in short, we want to be the group of 25 that help grow the intersection between meteorology and emergency management. It's a really fun role to be in.
And talk about the evolution of that, because we were sort of at the forefront of that here in Alabama, James. We sort of, you know, the Alabama Department of Public Health and the Weather Service here in Birmingham had to do something really fast because we were staring down the barrel of an outbreak and facing all this, you know, sheltering problems, shuttered shelters and different things. Talk about, you know, how that issue evolved for us here in Alabama. And, you know, how I thought the Weather Service here reacted really well with the state very quickly.
You know, we kind of talked internally about that, and then all of a sudden, here we are getting into April as the key of the heart of the tornado season, and we had multiple events. And I needed what my main thing is this: I think we should be telling people something consistent. If they watch it on TV, or if they see it on an EMA page or hear it in the Weather Service, I don't want everybody saying something different. So I encouraged our friends down at the Weather Service to work with the state, ADPH, the Alabama Department of Public Health, and to come out with a joint statement so we can share publicly, which basically was not that big of a deal. It just says, number one, you got to shelter from the tornado first. That's the most important thing. That is an immediate threat to life. Number two, do the best you can with the COVID-19 thing. But they did that. They worked together, came out with a statement. We all pushed it, said the same thing. So I thought it worked out very well. Nice to see the coordination.
And the same thing happened with the AMS folks and with what you guys did. Talk about that process, you know, how it evolved, and, you know, you said it got done really, really quickly, and that was really, really important in a situation like this. You couldn't wait till after the tornado season was over. You know, talk about how that evolved and how it happened, Tom.
We got what I think was a Friday afternoon call from Doug Hildebrand, who's the head of our parent commission, who said, look, we've got a big severe risk coming up. The AMS wants to say something about this. And so we developed a draft statement that was easy to draft quickly because of the work that James had done with Alabama, because of what some of the states have done already in issuing their own statements. We were able to take elements of them and then help build that common foundation of what the AMS wanted to say, or at least what our committee wanted to say, and the AMS ended up going with. So we were able to do what we did quickly because the states had been really proactive, and NWS had worked very well with state OEM in trying to get early verbiage out there. It's not easy to be the first one to come up with the right thing to say, but it is relatively easier to be the one that takes all that verbiage, gets it all in one-page statement and sends it out. So like James said, we wanted to have something where everybody, whether it's the broadcast community, private sector and network TV, or private sector, private enterprise, NWS, we wanted to have one statement where everybody could come back and say, this is what you should be doing right now, and then put their own spin on it, because it was incredibly important for us to make sure that the public knew their local EMA, public health agency, however they're structured, is always going to be the be-all for that kind of information. And so at the end, we didn't give anything definitive. We didn't give anything too overgeneralized, because we wanted to make sure people were checking with their local shelter operator and their local emergency management agency.
You think it helped some of those local agencies decide to open their shelters in the process because they knew it was important, or?
Man, that is, that's a hard question to answer. And I apologize for the ghost that just opened up behind me. My cats have been thumping at the door, trying to attack me. So
we have a rule here on WeatherBrains. If they open the door, you have to show them to us, Tom.
I was waiting for the kid to like run behind and the babysitter and all of that again.
They're going to jump in. You'll see one pop up on a shoulder soon enough. You know, it's hard to tell if we helped influence decisions at the local or municipal public safety levels. I hope that we did, but I trust the expertise that local public safety have. So hopefully they looked at our statement and said, yep, that's what we're thinking, and shared it to help contribute to the authority in their public information campaign.
I know Kim wants to ask something. James, you probably shamed a few You probably shamed a few organizations into opening, especially on Easter Sunday, probably around Alabama.
Got to do what you got to do, man. You got to do what you got to do.
Kim, you go.
Well, this is a question I have for our EM folks. You mentioned that consistency of message is a really nice goal, but you also talked about how it was really important to prioritize local decision making. And I think with the disease outbreak being so locally variable, there's really no other way to handle it. So what does consistency mean to you? Does it mean that it has to be some set of guidance that is followed for everyone everywhere all the time? Or can it be that we come up with new ways of framing consistency in this era of disaster threat and COVID?
Well, I can just go ahead and say there's no consistency in any of this, honestly. I mean, to say that we're flying by the seat of our pants, this is something we've always kind of dreamed about, stayed awake at night about. But, the reality of it is, I think a lot of us, I'm not going to say caught off guard, but really quickly spun up plans for this. And part of the challenge with the hurricane statement and the tornado statement is we have to keep it generalized enough, because every jurisdiction does something different. And, not locally, but even state jurisdictions do things differently. So we had to keep it on a general level and encourage people to talk to local officials, because that's ultimately, where things lie in a disaster and an emergency. It's always going to be that local level. But, we also we're trying to encourage them to take some action, because we had heard of a lot of shelters being closed just because either the emergency manager wasn't sure how to handle the situation, or just the fear of the virus itself was just too overwhelming for them to really even take the time to think about. And a lot of them, especially a lot of these smaller organizations, it's one person, emergency manager for a county who's trying to respond to the pandemic and think about severe weather and all of this other activity going on in their jurisdiction. So we had to find a way to at least give them some guidance without it being the end all be all.
In putting together those statements, to what degree had you guys engaged public health communities for their input? I was curious when I read it, because I did wonder, and I was on the AMS Council reviewing, I did wonder if we were privileging our meteorological perspective over their public health perspective, and if they agreed that the tornado threat, for example, was the more important threat, especially for every jurisdiction all the time. So did that linkage happen, or was it really a statement that was generated within more of the EM weather community? Yeah, how did that work out?
Yeah, I mean, I know Tom can jump in here too, but right now in the middle of a pandemic, emergency management and public health are pretty much joined at the hip. So, we did have that influence from public health, both from FEMA and, all of our local emergency management jurisdictions. Tom, do you have anything more to add?
No, I think that's the best way to put it. We didn't directly reach out to public health. In hindsight, that would have been a great idea. And it's something that we should think about with our hurricane statement. But as Shane said, they're so intertwined with emergency management that we thought that we were getting all of that feedback inside of there. Now, that said, that's why we didn't want to make any definitive comments, because it's a personal risk-based decision. You have to make your own decision about whether or not you'd like to seek community shelter if you know that your home is not an unacceptable form of shelter in a tornado. So our viewpoint was that that's a personal choice that you're going to go through and make, but to make that personal choice well ahead of time and know where you're going to shelter. So our biggest call to action with this, and will be with the hurricane statement, is figure out what you want to do now before the sky starts to turn gray and dark, because you don't want to be making that decision when you've only got 15 minutes to spare.
Were there any elements that y'all got pushback on that you thought, well, we should have seen this coming, or that you couldn't have foreseen coming? Something that you just didn't know would come back to you?
So when we were going through the initial drafts of it, we thought we wanted to be specific about CDC guidance. So we would say, wear a face covering, stay 6 feet, and get really into the weeds about what the CDC was saying, as far into the weeds as simple public health guidance is here. But we had a really great suggestion, and I think I want to attribute it to Rob Dale. I don't know if I can, because my memory is fading at 28 already. But he said, look, things change. Make sure the statement's somewhat evergreen. And so we deviated away from that. And Shane, that could have been you as well, now that I'm saying this out loud and remembering all the feedback you've given for everything. But it was important for us to always deflect to the consistency of authority in the situation. Look to the CDC for your guidance instead of trying to pull something from the AMS 6 months later when our guidance has changed significantly.
Yeah, and even within the last 3 months, as we learn more about the virus, how it acts, how it transmits, how it, reacts on surfaces, all of this other stuff. I mean, the guidance has already changed so many times just in the last 3 months. And so that really was important, is to keep it generalized and just provide a link to, hey, here's where to find the latest CDC guidance.
I'm still not sure whether a mask protects me or the other people, or what it does. I'm still not certain about that. Can anybody?
Right now it's the other people. So, well, it depends on the mask. We'll go with that.
Depends on the mask.
Yeah, if you're wearing a full N95 and you actually have access to that and want to wear that because it is extremely uncomfortable, you're pretty well protected both ways. But a cloth mask or any kind of covering will keep you from transmitting it to other people. And of course, if you're wearing a mask and the other person is wearing a mask, the risk of transmission is much, much lower.
I think you summed up what I've learned recently pretty darn well there, Shane. Thank you for that. Kim, go ahead.
I've become an epidemiologist in a way I never intended on doing in emergency management.
Yeah, we're all junior epidemiologists around here recently. It seems like.
Oh my gosh, we are. I thought I was so cutting edge when, with our group we're forming at the lab, I had hired a guy to actually start to do tornado epidemiology and introduce the word epidemiology to our field. And then the COVID happened, and I was like, oh man, well, I guess now everybody's going to know what that means a little bit. One of the just a side detraction here, but one of the things that you need to do good epidemiology work is not just to count fatalities, but also to count survivors, so you can get sort of a base rate of survival. And one of the things that is my contention is we don't do that very well as a field. So I think NSSL can take a really key role in helping us understand how can you actually survive these things. So that's what epidemiologists do. But from the AMS Council perspective, looking at the statement, I think we've just touched on one of the things that I had a big question on: who is the audience for this? And should it actually be emergency managers that we're giving some advice to about how to run? If you're going to have public shelters that are open, what kinds of options can you offer? Like to, suggest that there be a mask requirement and social distancing and so on. Do you know if any emergency managers ever adopted policies like this and how transparently they were communicated out to their populations? Fortunately, I mean, I'm just grateful we didn't have that many events in the Southeast. Those 2 big events in April were really it. So I'm asking this almost to help us think about the hurricane season. What can we learn from this process, and maybe think about what is it that needs to be communicated clearly in the operation of all these facilities if people are going to be evacuating ahead of a hurricane?
The first thing that comes to mind right now is, I don't know if there is a right answer to that, especially because each jurisdiction handles things differently. Even PPE distribution and their local laws, ordinances, states of emergencies, declarations. I mean, all of that right now, every single area is different. You can go 5 miles down the road and need be required to wear a face mask to go inside or outside. So it's kind of an extra level of challenge, but that's why we really make sure we key into those local decision makers.
Sorry, Troy, you go ahead.
And Troy's muted.
Get her done. This is one that I actually got on the phone and Kim went, God, why does Troy call me when, on the day off? But Kim and I had a phone conversation about this, and I'm real interested to get Tom, Matt, and Shane's view on this in a sense. And I wish I had I do have a broadcast, Matt and James. I didn't think about that, him being the host. But here we are in this pandemic and the stress that's inherently involved with it. And if you don't think people are stressed, Shane, we can talk about it. You know about it. Everyone here knows about that stress. Do we, as Weather Service meteorologists, private sector, Tom, do we need to think about how we our severe weather messages, how we couch those in the age of the pandemic without scaring people to death. People are already on the edge anyway. I mean, people are on the edge right now. And I'm not sure the way that we would do a tornado warning in 2019 doesn't send people off the edge in 2020. Am I out of line on this? I'd be interested in getting your views.
I think one thing I've thought about, like with us, so we started like a special COVID briefing that we're sending to our partners every day, and it's really simple, one pager, highlighting it. You know, heat's a big issue for. They've had some of these federal centers for testing that have been open in some of the desert cities, even as far as April, but to me, it's like I almost feel like in the in-between periods of significant weather, you actually have to take your foot off the gas a little bit compared to what you normally do. And I know it's been a struggle, like even partner engagement in weather, because and Shane, I know you totally know what I'm talking about here, because our partners are so busy right now. And they have so much going on. It's like, and I just, it's not like giving people a break, but like, we're used to, especially in this age of decision support, pumping those messages out now. And I think it's almost like when you're in between threats, stand back even further, as far as the weather community, even further than we normally would.
I mean, and we've had no break since late February or March. The American public is stressed. There's a lot of other things going on, and then you throw a tornado watch in on top of it, and people just say that's it. I guess the locusts and the killer hornets and everything else are coming at, and now the dust is coming at us.
And the equine encephalitis is next.
And I just wonder if at some point, and Kim, we had it was a great phone conversation about it that Kim and I had. And I said, I just wonder if people are going to become so fatigued by all this that at some point they're going to say, well, I'll just do what it will. And we've talked about it. I guess it's just the will. I guess it's just what's going to happen. So I'm not going to do anything.
It's tough. I mean, I don't think that any of us were prepared for managing a kind of disaster that goes on and on and on for months and months and months. Right. Even in the public health community, they're struggling with this because the recommendations that they offer, that honestly are the recommendations that we follow to a large degree in our field. A lot of what we've learned about human behavior under conditions of risk and uncertainty was learned in public health. And we've ported those lessons over to try to apply them in other disasters. They even that stuff, it just hasn't really held water with what's gone on for these past several months. So it is hard. It's a marathon, much more than a sprint. And I hope that the Center for Risk and Crisis Management here, you won't mind me divulging this, but they've done some research on the degree to which people maybe pay attention to weather risks less now because they are feeling this degree of stress. And it's a large share of people who report that indeed they do feel it. Something between 30-40% of the population is less attentive to various kinds of severe threats. And I don't think that's surprising to anybody. And correspondingly, there are many fewer people who would intend to evacuate ahead of different kinds of things like hurricanes. I know that was found also in a study we talked about a couple weeks ago from AAA, I think, had done that study looking at Florida and people not being willing to evacuate. There's only so much you can deal with, and it is quite complex, and each household does need to make choices for themselves. So while you were talking about individuals, emergency managers making decisions for their jurisdiction and that being so complex, within those jurisdictions are a set of individuals who have different health concerns and different vulnerabilities. And to think that we can have any unified action this year, it is harder than ever. So Troy, I'm so glad you raised that. I feel overwhelmed. I think I feel overwhelmed as a person who, is both a vulnerable population as a pregnant woman and also as a risk communication scholar who's trying to figure out how to give anyone any advice. Like, I don't know. It's I think a lot of people feel that way.
Well, let me ask James, because I mean, James is our leader here and everything else. And James, you've had a couple of episodes of severe weather in the middle of all this. Has it gone through your mind at all as a broadcast meteorologist about how you phrase something or how you discuss it with your viewers in the middle of a severe weather episode? You do such a good job anyway. You educate. I mean, I sit here and watch you from here. I'm hooked on James Spann when there's severe weather in Alabama. I mean, explain that. Someone call out someone to check on my head. I mean, I'm watching James in Alabama, but at the same time, I mean, has that been something that you thought about?
You know, when we had the big severe weather month, that was way back in April.
Okay.
And this was all kind of new. And, we had some pretty clear messaging, I think, but I didn't think much about it when I was on the air for the Easter Sunday event. That was a big day. We had a big severe weather outbreak that day. And then the next Sunday we had another one. But if you ask me that now, I might tell you something a little differently. People, Troy, are on edge. We live in a different world right now. Psychologically, people are in a different place. And if I'm trying to get people to respond to a tornado warning and take action, I just wonder what different messaging we need to be using right now. I will tell you, there is some type of change in society that's happened over the past 3 months. And if you look at, for example, today I posted an update for the race weather at the Talladega Superspeedway. NASCAR had a big event today. It immediately degenerated into vile hate, anger, rage, vitriol. People were fighting. Left-wingers were fighting with each other. Right-wingers were fighting with each other. They're all fighting against each other. And people are just on edge and they are angry. And it is a very strange place in society. And I've got to come on television and somehow during a tornado outbreak, if we had one today, I think I'd treat it differently than I would back in April with so much going on. And that's why Kim's here to help us and tell us what we need to do.
Yep.
So thank you, Kim.
Welcome. I have absolutely no answers. No, I mean, this is a complex, gosh, I appreciate what I really appreciate about, what you're feeling and what Troy has been feeling and what you're sharing here is we're under a set of complex social, dynamics and pressures that are unparalleled. When you take some fundamental bedrock of society and destabilize it like a pandemic will, I think you're open to a bunch of other difficulties that cascade forward from that. So even just all of us individually thinking about how can I speak to, okay, there are other risks I want to speak to. How can I do that sensitively and in a way that really resonates with people? It's a whole new ballgame and challenge. And I have to wonder, all of you folks who have hurricane experience and who are working on this issue of planning for the hurricane season and messaging in the seasons to come for various kinds of threats, Matt out in Southern California too. Are you thinking about this? Are you thinking about how you'll sensitively message? Are you changing your thinking on messaging strategies to try to give messages about risk and threat, but to a very saturated, very angsty population? I think I'll just go around the screen first and ask it, Matt, it looks like you have some thoughts.
Well, I feel like the hurricane problem is going to be the most acute of all of them, because you think people have to leave, they have to drive out of state. I mean, I'm leery of staying in a hotel right now. And I think a lot of people feel that way. Definitely a lot of people are leery about flying. But of course, most folks that evacuate are going to drive. But also, it definitely looks like it's going to be a very, very active season with, possibly a weak La Nina setting up, and already sea surface temperatures are well above normal. So in my head, I'm already like, man, it just seems like a higher likelihood than normal of a U.S. strike this year from something significant. And I think it's going to be really challenging, obviously messaging that from the weather side, but the partners making evacuation decisions, and certainly folks that live in well-built homes inland, probably emphasizing that message. You don't necessarily need to get on the road type of thing. It's going to be really tough for sure.
To offer some perspective for not the general public, in the conversations that I've been having for the past 3 months with corporate at the Cataways, I'm talking about something serious. Great, nobody can see me trying to hold back laughter. And the conversations I've had with corporate environmental health and safety managers, emergency preparedness coordinators, they've hit this zone where very early in the pandemic, there was rather a complete lapse in communications. They didn't want to talk about tornado season. They didn't want to talk about hurricane season, MCS season, floods, wildfires. All that was off the table for about a month. And then after that, they seemed to hit this higher gear where they had COVID. They knew what to do with it. Now they needed to replan how they were going to handle hurricanes, how they were going to handle evacuations. And I think it's a fantastic thing that public safety professionals can get into that zone and completely focus on rather what they need to do to handle the disaster at large. But it raises this concern in the back of my head that a year from now, once all of this, knock on wood, wanes out, is this going to be a new form of reticent stress that's going to build up and kind of cause people to implode a bit after they've gone through 18 months of intense stress and planning without taking a break?
Yeah, and it's really interesting right now because every day when I walk into the office, we have to figure out what message we're going to share, whether it's testing, whether it's COVID related, whether it's weather related, whatever it is, because there's just information overload right now. I mean, it's just the reality. And the other thing we're battling right now, though, is a distrust in the government. Whether it be from anything COVID related to the protests, to politics, to whatever it is, so we're really, really struggling to find an avenue to reach people where they actually listen. And, I don't think there's a right answer for any of this, but, one thing we have kind of come back on, and I don't necessarily like it, but it's just the reality of everything going on right now, is a lot of our preparedness messaging is out the window. We are almost now casting every single day as to what people really need to pay attention to. And we're kind of picking topics each day. Today, the big topic was lightning, both at our testing sites, but also the people who are out downtown protesting and that kind of thing, because a lot of them don't have, the same tools that we have sitting at home. So, I mean, it's just trying to figure out what the most important message is each day without trying to overwhelm people.
Well, I'll just wrap up. It sounds like you're describing that the partners, at least, and emergency managers, there's a variety of responses going, but largely they've been able to sort of think about planning, but there are some complexities when things are going out to the public. It looks like Bill has a question to follow up on all that.
Yeah, Matt, you mentioned hotels, and I've seen some FEMA RFPs going out to hotels. Is there a move? Have y'all heard that maybe away from public shelters this year toward hotels for sheltering? Is that a move within the government to push things that way? Is that a real direction, or just something that I perceived? And you mentioned, Matt, people are uncomfortable going to hotels. Hotels are spending all their time trying to make people more comfortable. Where do you see that seam? What are they most uncomfortable about?
Well, I think I can't speak to the sheltering in hotels, but as far as I have heard from some of the tourism sector here in San Diego, actually through my Rotary Club. And I think the issue is, just folks are worried about the sanitation and being crowded with others. And, they even mentioned the articles about air conditioning and how it helps or doesn't help COVID, and I think, and the hotels are really, really trying to get out there and really do a good job of cleaning, but also advertising this is what we're doing. And I know here in San Diego, they're trying to their focus has been on like beefing up local tourism, like staycation type thing, because they're all having a hard time right now. So, but I just think it just transportation in general, and that would certainly affect the hurricane evacuation problem.
It's a scary thing. Just going to the doctor today, it's scary to be in an elevator. It's scary to walk into, any space. So I get that.
Hey, Bill, but you have that tie back. I'm kind of interested now. I mean, you have this tie back to hotels and that sort of thing. Tell us what we don't know, or make us feel better about what you see as someone that's a little bit of an insider with that sort of thing. I assume there's been some things that we'll never see that we don't understand and don't appreciate that are being done by hotels that they were not done more than 2 or 3 or 4 months ago.
Well, hotels have always used hospital grade cleaners and all those things. There's no question about it. But the most important thing now is to make sure that those high touch points are more frequently done. I don't want someone in my room now after I've been in it. And most of the American Hotel Lodging Association, the major chains, Marriott, Hilton, IHG, are addressing that. Hilton's gone as far as to putting a sticker on the door. So when you get that, you're breaking a seal. When you go in that room, meaning that once it was clean, nobody else has been in that room. And that's important to me as a consumer. But I think, the predictions are that the hotels that are going to do well, Matt, to what you're saying, are the smaller, by the roadside, interstate, easy to get in, easy to get out. I've missed the big crowds. The ones that are hurting are these big box convention type hotels, that have 500-600 rooms, because people don't want to be in that space. It's going to be harder to convince people to come back to those, for sure.
I think what you're saying actually lines up with, I was listening to an NPR broadcast, if I can remember. It was Planet Money that had pointed out, I believe, that the bigger box stores, to your point, Bill, we're not seeing as high revenue as the smaller store or the mid-range hotels, because the business travelers aren't going out as frequently as we used to. My Marriott points are sitting away in a bank somewhere, and I'm not going to touch them for a year and a half. But if we have to go somewhere, we're going to stay at probably a lower grade hotel because we're going to be vacationing and not on the company dime. So I think it totally changes the dynamic that you see with where people stay. And the touch on the earlier conversation about the move of shelter, or the move towards hotels over large congregate shelters. We were joking the other day because we all, if we didn't know before, learned the term congregate and non-congregate. Congregate shelters being gymnasiums, larger areas where you've got several people without any barriers between them, maybe in cots next to each other, and non-congregate being like hotels. And what I've seen from the Red Cross, at least early on, is that there's a huge focus on exhausting the non-congregate, getting people into hotels, dormitories, someplace where they've got their own space, before going and using congregate sheltering. So I'm hoping that a lot of the messaging as we get closer to August and September transitions towards find your own place, because there's going to be limited spacing in congregate and non-congregate, and you're going to be in a hotel before you're in a gymnasium. But it's been interesting to look at the tropical cyclones globally and how other countries are responding to the mass influx of evacuations and community shelters, because they're going to be the best tell of what's going to happen here in a couple of months.
And the problem with, getting hotels, for some people, socioeconomic levels, that's hard to do.
Yeah. Bill,
they can't afford it.
You asked the question. I don't remember when it was. It was about two and a half weeks ago. I was in on a FEMA conference call and out of Washington, and they actually discussed more the potential to try to take hotels and in this age of this pandemic as evacuee type places instead of the gymnasium. Well, not gymnasiums, but schools, things like that, where you have a bunch of people together that Tom was talking about. So
yeah, I think that move's afoot, and I don't think it's a bad move because the space is there, and the hotels are anxious for business and that sort of thing. And certainly, if you can get the right people to those places, because some people can't afford to get to them. Yeah, it's going to involve transportation. It's going to involve, cost and that sort of thing. But That's hopefully a FEMA thing, and
Well,
that is good that there's some signs that it's moving that way.
I'll also tell you that, and this is something that if anyone know much about this, it'll probably be Matt, being on the West Coast, but been kind of following what's been going on at Guam. Guam has, having been out there a few times, their tourist has dropped to nothing. They have nothing. But with the naval base and also Anderson Air Force Base out there, and of course the deal with the ship, the government actually took over a couple of the tourist hotels. They actually bought them out, and that's where they put a lot of the military people. At least 3 or 4 of the tourist hotels they actually took over and bought those places for a while, instead of having people in these big locations where everyone was sharing common space. And this was something they practiced in Guam. The hotels figured, okay, we'll close for a while, but we'll make a little money. It's better than not making any money at all.
And I think as a consumer, the other thing that makes me comfortable is contactless. I think that's been a key component, is to, make the processes frictionless as possible, as few touch points, get the guest in, get the guest out. That makes me comfortable when I'm buying anything, whether that's groceries or whatever right now, just to reduce those touch points. So that's good news. So Jen, I know you wanted to ask a question from your side. So go with that.
I was just kind of noodling the whole conversation, which is really great. And going back to the broadcasting aspect of it, I come from a old school radio. We're totally different than TV and all that. So I was thinking through, has anything changed in my communication since the whole COVID thing started? And it hasn't. And I was thinking about when I was doing coverage for Cristobal. It was an NPR stations out of New Orleans and Baton Rouge. They wanted the facts. They just want to know, where's it going, what's happening, and they wanted to inform the public. And then I was doing coverage yesterday in Kansas, and I just did what I always do. And what I think radio is different, because we're always with them every hour, whether we're on recorded or we're doing lives. And so they're used to hearing our voice. And I think, there's trust there. And it's the same way with James. He's got that rapport, he's got the trust. And so I think right now people are seeking calm and truth. Not that we're not lying to him as meteorologists, but there's people that go hysteric over stuff, and it's all over social media, and the people in their basements, we've talked about them, that come out of the woodwork and are making people in a panic. I think it's using a calm voice. And I've always told them I have the mom voice. So when I'm telling people what's happening. So it's just, I think it's, from my perspective, it's how do we calmly tell people? And a lot of times I'm having to do it in about 30 seconds. How do you get that message out? But that's just, I wanted to just throw out my perspective on that. But for me, I broadcasted the same yesterday as I did 20 years ago. And I think that people want to hear that calming voice and nothing panicking, nothing dramatic.
But do you agree, Jen? And this is something I don't worry about with James or with Jen, but where I worry about is a severe weather episode in a very competitive market, when you've got promotions people writing the teases, tornadoes sweep the state. Oh, there's only been one so far, yes. But that's sort of where I'm going. I think in a way you kind of got to reel that back a little bit. Yeah,
I agree. I don't think people want to see that. They don't want to hear that. And I think that will push people over the edge, unfortunately. And, I don't deal with a lot of that in radio. It's just, and from what we've heard from the radio perspective, weather is still so important as an element of their local. And, I could be just as dramatic as the next person to try to tell the story of what's happening. And that's just, people don't want to hear that. They want to know the facts.
I don't know if I'd call it a mom voice, but it certainly is a reassuring voice.
It is.
Thank you.
And I've always enjoyed listening to your radio broadcast, that's for sure.
Thank you, Bill.
For sure. But so Matt, talk about our friend Alex Tardy. We had so much fun when we were out there in 2017. Are you still doing the Weather Fest that you guys that we do in Orange County? Are y'all still keeping
I've heard all about the
going?
Great. Well, so we were planning to do a Weather Fest on June 6th. And I've heard all about the great Weather Fest that happened just before I got here. So I'm like, let's do one this year. And and he was really excited about it too, obviously. And had started the ball rolling with the planning and everything, and the office was excited because it's kind of one of those, when you have the classic Weather Service open house, it's all hands on deck, and you get to meet the partners face to face. And we held out. I think we held out until we waited through April. Maybe there's a chance when they started talking about California opening up, and then I think probably, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago, we finally had to pull the plug. And it's a shame because we had the budget set up and everything. We're even gonna have Ali Skywarn there. So I don't know who is going to be the lucky draw, the short straw for that, but hopefully, in the next fiscal year, we'll be able to do it, because I think it's been probably, I'm guessing it's been at least 4 years. I can't remember if our last one was 2016 or 2015, but hopefully we'll have one next year.
Well, Alex sure was an inspiration when we did ours there in 2017.
Yeah, he
Orange
is
County.
awesome.
So please tell him hello for us.
I will, definitely.
So Shane, I noticed some disturbing news today that a lot of public health officials are resigning, retiring. And I didn't dig deeply into the story, but I assume some of it's fatigue, some of it's just the duration of this disaster, some of it's pushback they're getting from their politicians, their local officials. Is all that true, or is it, is there another reason? Are they getting pushed out the door?
Yeah, I honestly haven't seen that. However, I wouldn't be surprised if it was true for all of those reasons. There is a lot of fatigue right now, a lot of frayed nerves. Sometimes we do have political influences that go against, best practices or what we want to do. And, usually we work through those as always are there. But with this being such a long event, it's just everybody's tired. And I think, even with a lot of the decisions we're making today, it's they're not as robust as the decisions we made months ago, just because, it's kind of normal at this point, as crazy as it is to say a pandemic is normal. But two, everybody's just tired. And we know any decision we make, it goes back to the public and what are they willing to accept?
It scares me. Each and every one of those professionals that we lose were weaker because of it, Troy Kimmel.
Yep.
With their experience. So
Shane, I was curious, what kind of hours are you putting in these days?
My last pay period was 125 hours, so it's
oh my gosh,
it's pretty intense. Now most of them have not been that bad because we haven't had the protests for most of them. But through this whole thing, I've been averaging about 90 to 100 hours a pay period.
So I want to highlight that Shane's been one of the most active members of the committee that we had. I had no idea you were working so much. I would have stopped trying to send you so many emails. You have been, well, and it's crazy because whenever you have a good idea, you share it, and oftentimes they're so fantastic. I had no idea that you were coming up with all of those on 2 hours of sleep a night. That is incredible.
Well, I get a little bit more than 2. I will say I get about 7 hours of sleep a night. I haven't slept this good though in years.
Yeah.
That's amazing, Shane. That is just amazing. Do you get the feeling that any given day you could wake up, you have absolutely no idea what you'll be facing? Are you pretty much just resigned at this point to, I'm going to do whack-a-mole today?
I tell people consistently, I don't even know what I'm doing the next hour at this point. It is ever changing, ever dynamic.
Tell us, for people who maybe are less familiar with emergency management, and then I want to pivot to a question for Tom on this too. Tell us a little bit about what role emergency management is playing in all of what's going on. What is it that you are responsible for and organizing? And I feel like this role, we talk about it some on this show, but it generally is a little bit less seen as a part of the public safety workforce, but is nonetheless very critical. And from the perspective of the weather community, we see you as incredibly vital. So tell us a little bit about the role you've been playing in everything going on.
For something like a pandemic, of course, public health is always going to be the lead. And in any event, no matter what the disaster is, somebody's usually going to be the lead in it, whether it's wildfire or anything like that. You're gonna have fire department, you're gonna have police, you're gonna have whoever's incident it is. Where emergency management really comes in though is the logistics, getting the resources, connecting the people who need to be connected. So, with COVID, logistics and PPE procurement has been a huge part of what we've been doing every day, and helping get incident management teams here for the testing locations that we have, so we can run those, because we don't have the personnel to really sustain those and get those going. We've also been doing a lot of public information. We work with the Board of Health directly, with DPH on the state level, and with CDC, and get the messaging consistently out. Try to bring it together for all of our jurisdictions, for all of our partners. Each day we're putting out a situation report with the Board of Health that goes out to over 2,000 people, just to clue them in on what each jurisdiction in our area is doing. Because people are so busy right now, they don't have time to call that neighboring jurisdiction and ask them if they're open, they're closed, when they're reopening, what phase they're in, whatever they're doing. I mean, it's just, so we fulfill that gap. We really help step in and keep the information flowing. I know my agency alone, we've processed over 1,200 resource requests for PPE and for nursing home testing and National Guard testing teams. It's been a massive amount. We're well over triple what we were for the Super Bowl in terms of resources. So, I mean, that gives you an idea of just how much is going on behind the scenes.
That's truly remarkable. And it makes me want to turn to Tom too and ask a question about, things going on behind the scenes and managing the multiple threats from all of this. As I recall, AccuWeather and you specifically had taken on some role early on in thinking about COVID testing sites as a particularly vulnerable potential population. And can you describe a little bit about what is being done from the weather community to partner with that kind of community to make sure that those are as safe as possible when weather threats can strike?
I think the entire weather enterprise has done a truly fantastic job of making sure that those very vulnerable COVID testing sites have had some form of coverage. So nearly every private sector company that I've seen is offering some form of free service, which to the average person may be an easy donation, but they're always putting meteorologists out in front on a radar screen, watching and sending warnings. To seeing the NWS, including the testing sites inside of watch warnings and advisories, there has been this outflowing of support from the weather community, because by and far, we're good at weather. We're not going to be getting down there with the nasal swabs. We're not going to be running tent operations. So our place is making sure that they're safe. And if you guys have been to them yet, I've been working at our local site in Wichita with Team Rubicon. They're not fun to be in when it's hot, when it's raining, when it's lightning. I've only made up one word so far. And some of the tents are hit and miss on how they're constructed. Some are great at 60 miles an hour, some are pop-up tents. And so I think the entire weather enterprise, public and private, both have together worked with these sites to make sure they understand the risk. They've got good advisories, and hopefully everyone is taking all those advisories and embedding them into a site safety plan. Though that said, you've got clinical staff out there who are wearing double hat as like the incident commander at the site and safety officer. And so it's a beautiful mess, but I haven't heard of any incident happening. And I think that is something we can attribute to so many good meteorologists giving so freely of their time in a bad, severe weather season and an already active hurricane season. We're all overworked, but I think it feels good to be giving so much of ourselves and to be doing it alongside the NWS and to have our warnings go hand in hand with private sector. It's been a really cool aspect of this.
That's
Did
great.
y'all
It has
add
to
any
feel-
testing sites, Matt, to your WarnGen software where you are? Have y'all had to do that?
So we've had a couple. So we've been supporting the federal government type testing sites, and we had one in India, which is flat out desert. That's where Coachella is held, and someday it'll come back again. And as I mentioned earlier, their primary issue has been heat, but we had some strong winds that affected them back in April when it's seasonal. We had another federal site in Escondido as well, which is about 10 minutes from the office, but we didn't do specific support for them, but we focused, on the government run sites. But I know that throughout Western region, at least in the Weather Service, a number of the local offices are supporting testing sites in their area on the government side.
I thought that was really cool. I'm glad you brought that up, Shane. Or Tom, glad you brought that up. That was really neat.
To provide a bit of color just for the weather community at large, weather warnings at these sites are never as easy as sending through a warning and everybody seeks shelter automatically. You've got queues of people, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes an hour long. It's really interesting to think through the logistics of getting that person in the middle car to shelter, but making sure that the person behind them or in front of them is not going to be blocked. It's almost like you've got this huge distribution center and you've got to find a way to get everybody into safety, and where do they go? There's so many good questions. And so I'm excited once this is over, and this will end one day, to have a huge town hall at AMS to be able to bring in people who ran the site, who had incidents, to learn so much about a high vulnerability asset with somebody who's not trained in weather safety, who's getting sometimes a foreign warning, and how they manage to protect everybody. Things are very complicated there, and I think it's going to net a lot of really neat lessons learned.
I wrote that down, Kim. This will end one day. Tom Bedard.
I need that on a plaque somewhere.
Shane, Atlanta's been a focal point for the protests. Has the Weather Service done anything any differently to be sensitive to the protests in terms of maybe stepping up the criteria a little bit and making sure that a warning or an advisory got issued maybe a little earlier? In your estimation, Keith and his team out there, have they had to do that, or have they done that? Can you tell?
So luckily we haven't had any significant severe weather. We have had special weather statements. I'm not sure if they're actually issuing them a little bit more proactively. And part of that is because they're usually pretty proactive in putting them out there anyway. We have been, and even with our testing sites, we do have a private vendor who keeps track of lightning, wind, and all of that. But I have on more than one occasion called them up and said, hey, I know we've got this storm coming. Can you give me a little bit more detail on what you guys are seeing? And I know they've got our testing sites in their Warn Gen software as well, because they consistently ask us what changes we have and everything else, which for us is a little bit more difficult because we only have 3 fixed sites and we have 6 mobile sites every day. So, I'm going in that private software every day and changing the location. So, I mean, it's one of those things where we're in pretty good contact with the Weather Service. We're always communicating with them through chat, and they're great partners to have.
It makes me feel really good to hear what all you guys are doing. It does give me some faith, because it troubled me when you said trust in government's at a really low level, but hopefully trust in local emergency management, trust in the Weather Service is still at a pretty high level, Kim. I would hope at this point. So
yeah, I would hope so too. Have you guys gotten any feedback on any of that? Do you know from the Weather Service side, emergency management, elsewhere in the weather enterprise, or is it just sort of a black box where you hope that we're not getting the negative feelings that other parts of the even public safety community are getting?
So, interestingly enough, like even the lightning and stuff, we've been putting lightning safety messages out there when we start getting lightning close to downtown or where the protest activities are. And we've been consistently using their hashtags because that's what they're looking at already on their phones and stuff. So we're hoping we're reaching them. The good news is we haven't had anybody upset, and in a situation like we're in right now, we're way more likely to get a lot of upset messages than we are the pleasant ones. But I think in this case, no comments is probably a good thing, but we have had quite a bit of engagement with likes and retweets. So that's good to see.
I know back in second week of April, we were deep in the California lockdown. We had a very significant week of heavy rain and flash flooding in our area. And we had to pump out a lot of social media posts flash flood warnings, we did a flash flood watch for like a 5-day period, which is quite a lot for us. And we got mostly positive feedback from that. But obviously they were, our partners were really focused on the lockdown because it was still relatively early in that. And that was when it was near its most closed down. So I know they were, I think at first, a little caught off guard, but I think, they gave us positive feedback. We needed that messaging. We needed you to bother us during that period because it was so critical.
That is great to hear. So it sounds like so far, if we can just keep doing what we're doing, I mean, speaking to the earlier conversation of how to do this well and with grace, with sensitivity, it's important to still get those messages out there. There are people who are still listening, still preparing, and it's good to know that you've gotten largely positive feedback.
All right, guys, let's do this. It's coming up on 17 after the hour. Let's take a quick break. For Tony Rice and his astronomy report, we're going to come back with the picks of the week, the weather roundup, and a whole lot more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Saturday was the June solstice, when the sun reached its highest point above the horizon, and the amount of daylight hours, or the time that the sun spends above the horizon, was at its greatest. So you'd expect that the earliest sunrise and latest sunset would also occur on this day, but they don't. The earliest sunrise always happens before the solstice and the latest sunset after, each separated by about a week here in the mid-latitudes. But why? The root cause lies not in the daily rotation of the Earth, but its yearly orbit around the sun. The sun rises and sets as the Earth rotates on its axis, of course, rotating a full 360 degrees. But because it's also moving around the sun, Earth must rotate just a little bit more each day to put the sun back in that highest point in the sky. As a result, solar noon shifts a pretty consistent 13 seconds later each day around this time of year. While daylight hours increase between the March equinox and June solstice, the difference from day to day is not nearly as consistent. Picture a roller coaster slowly cresting a hill. That increase in daylight slowed from an additional 30 seconds at the beginning of the month to about a second as the solstice drew near. Here in Raleigh, that earliest sunrise occurred back on June 13th, just a few seconds before 5:58 a.m. local. The next day, there was about 10 seconds more morning daylight, but solar noon still moved ahead by that 13 seconds and dragged sunrise with it. We crested that hill on Saturday, and daylight hours are getting shorter, but by a similarly scant amount. Sunset will continue to get later, just a little each day, until June 27th, when that daylight roller coaster finally picks up enough speed to shorten the amount of afternoon sunlight by more than 13 seconds. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me in RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
Had a few minutes to talk weather here. Again, doing the show on Monday, June the 22nd, and we have subtropical depression number 4 that formed today east of the upper Atlantic coast. Does this thing get a name? Is this going to get the name Dolly?
Might in a few minutes.
It's got about 24 hours, I think, where it's going to be over the Gulf Stream, and then it's done. So we'll see if this is the D storm or not. But other than that, the big buzz is the dust. Is it just me, or are you guys seeing media hysteria over this? I mean, really? I mean, it's just like you tune into some of these outlets, and I'm not going to call names or anything, but it's like, it's the end of the world. It's never happened before. You need triple masks on because you aren't going to be able to breathe because of all this dust. And it's just bizarre. I don't understand it. I don't know if it's the 2020 meme where they have to blow things out of proportion, but
the 7th level of Jumanji. I saw somebody said the 6th level is hurricane season. I guess the dust is level 7.
Well, did y'all see, James? Did you see some of the pictures today? I guess out of Puerto Rico and places like that. It really was impressive, and the ASOSs down there were showing 4 miles in haze at a lot of the locations down there. I saw some of those earlier in the day, and so in that way, it's kind of impressive. And I got interviewed by the Austin American Statesman over the weekend about it, and they were all bent out of shape. And I said, "Lord, folks, you've already got 2 masks on. This is a perfect time for the dust to blow in. You know, you've already got the mask on anyway." So, and they use that. So,
but anyway, you know, with all that air out there, we're not going to have any issues. I mean, I'm concerned about August and September, Troy. I mean, I just see a big one coming right at you from the Gulf.
Well, thank you, James.
I don't know. I got a bad feeling about this hurricane season. I don't know, but at least in the short term, we have some dry. I was trying to find. Here it comes. While I watch the cannons flashing. Where's that first August hurricane going? I clean my gun right here and dream of Galveston.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it again.
I'm sure the people in Houston appreciate that.
Really, the James fan club in Houston will be meeting tomorrow night. Yeah,
exactly. So Troy, how hot was it in Austin, Tejas today?
I looked down to where I wrote the numbers down, about 93 at Austin Bergstrom International Airport today, 94. That's actually down a degree or so, and came after a last week, Saturday morning. I'm still convinced on the computer models, one of the worst busts that we ever had. And if y'all watched, actually Kim sent this, but we had thunderstorms that came out of Oklahoma on a Friday night, and we sat there and watched them move across the Red River, and we all said, no, the ridge is in place and all that sort of thing. And about 6:10 on Saturday morning, after a 0 pop forecast for Austin the day before, I heard thunders, thought somebody's breaking in the house. I won't tell you what happened after that, but luckily I saw the lightning shortly thereafter. And we had about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of rain over parts of Austin in a relatively short period of time with a 0 pop forecast from the day before. So, and we're in for a more unsettled weather pattern here, it looks like, and even up Kim's way, into a more of a northwest flow situation, it looks like. And that buys us a couple inches of rain maybe before the end of the week. And the model suggests, James, down the road, maybe more rain as we get closer to the 4th of July. So we'll see.
Ooh. Okay. Tom, where are you located? Are you in Kansas?
I am in beautiful, scenic Wichita, Kansas.
Yeah.
So what happened to all your tornadoes in May and in early June? Kim had no action. You had a little bit, I guess, but not much.
We're still upset about the MCS that was supposed to come through town last night with 80-mile-an-hour winds, met the city limits, and died hilariously. It was my girlfriend is an actual forecast meteorologist. I haven't done it in years, and she came home last night upset because she had gotten ready for 80-mile-an-hour wind warnings to go out, was ready for them, and then came home and I think we were gusting to 30. So everybody in Wichita is upset. It's been hot and dry. We have wildfires and wheat fires instead of tornadoes. So we'll trade one disaster for another right now.
Yeah, the subsidence chasing teams will be out in full force in coming months out there. So Jane, what you got in Atlanta? It rained over there today, didn't it?
Yeah, we got some rain and storms today, but it not before it hit almost 90. I think we got up to about 87. Yeah, pretty much from 11 a.m. onward till about 6 o'clock today, we had just storms continually roll through.
And Matt, sunny and 80 in San Diego today?
Yeah, it was at the office. It was a beautiful day, but in our area, I was just looking at our temp. So we put out a daily temperature report with like 100 sites on it. And we had the coolest morning low was 47 at Campo, which is about 45-minute drive east of San Diego in the mountains. San Diego had a high of 71. Palm Springs was 110.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
We had a couple of spots in our area on the coast that were upper 60s. So highs were anywhere from 68 to 110, depending on where you were.
That's a
in our area.
schizophrenic CWA. I mean,
Yeah, 68 at San Diego right now, 105 in Imperial.
Yeah, about an hour apart, an hour drive.
Oh my gosh.
Now, hey, Matt, is Ron Burgundy still on the air there with Brick Tamlin doing weather in San Diego?
Keep it classy.
Classy. I'll tell you what, my first AMS meet or my second AMS meeting was the one in San Diego in 2005, the last time it was held in San Diego. And I was so excited to turn on the TV and see what local news was like broadcasting about the weather. And the first thing that they showed, the first meteorologist I saw was the guy who was at the gym pumping iron. And then he gave his, his 7-day, and there was at the bottom, there was some like, weather emergency label or something. He still was at the gym, but they were having rain. They were having rain, and it was a weather emergency because there was localized puddling as far as I could tell. And I just thought, this is another universe, Matt. You have gone to a different universe.
Yeah, I really had to get used to like a half an inch of rain in an hour is a big deal. That was a total reset. I still struggle with that sometimes.
Are rip currents a big deal, Matt? We had the folks from Mobile.
Yeah, they're actually our number one killer here. So we have a huge rip current program. We've got about a dozen lifeguard sites on the coast that we work with, and we get reports from them. We do a lot of outreach with the lifeguard communities as well.
Awesome. So Shane, Matt, and Tom, fair warning, we're about to ask you for a pick of the week here in a few minutes. So come up with something really good that is remotely weather related. And we're going to do that right now. And again, we're going to do a triple email segment. Aubrey should be back next week. She's been off for a couple of weeks. She should be back. So my pick of the week, it is a paper that's being published in Weather, Climate, and Society in the new edition that's just out, July 2020. The title of the paper, Severe Weather Forecasts and Public Perceptions, an analysis of the 2011 super outbreak in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Kim, have you seen this one by any chance?
I haven't read it yet, but I think it's some folks from Howard University, if I remember right, who did that study.
I don't recognize the names, and I've not had a chance to read the entire paper. It's obviously on my reading list here, but it says the study focuses on a single tornado track that passed through Tuscaloosa. And it goes on to say it examines the potential gap between the dissemination of severe weather warnings and the public's behavioral response. How many years have we been looking at this? 9? Yeah. So anyway, look, any new information is welcome, and I look forward to reading that. But again, the link to the paper is going to be on the website, weatherbrains.com. All right, Jen, let's go to you for your pick of the week, ma'am.
All right. So I've been 2 big summaries coming out tomorrow on Tornado Talk, and I have a book. It's the Shinston Tornado. John L. Finlayson. This was originally produced in 1948, and then it's been reproduced by the Historical Society, and it is an awesome book. So if you're a tornado historian, that needs to be on your bookshelf. He interviewed a lot of folks from that area after the Shinston tornado, the deadliest tornado ever in West Virginia, and only one of 2 F4s that have ever hit. So we have a summary coming out detailing the Shinston tornado tomorrow, and then the entire outbreak, because there were at least 7 major tornadoes that went through on that day. So it's a great book, and I fell in love with the community, and just having him talk to everybody, and some of their stories are just amazing. I wish I could have shared all of them, but I picked a few to share on the summary.
Awesome, good deal. Now, is this available on Amazon? I guess we'll get a link.
Yeah, you can get this on Amazon.
Okay, we'll put a link up on the website. Thanks, Jen. All right, Troy, what is your pick of the week?
I have, James, 2, and one of them's come at last minute, and it ties actually a little bit with Matt on this, which is really an amazing story. I just got this in from Victor Murphy, who is at Southern Region headquarters. Victor is our Southern Region climate focal point. At 2015 Zulu, which would be at about 3:15 this afternoon, James, we got the Jonesboro ASOS going again. If you remember, it was wiped out by the tornado on the 28th of March. There are two parts to the ASOS. One is out in the field, the what we call the DCP, and then the ACU sits in the building, has the barometer cells in it. That building completely wiped out. In fact, when they bulldozed that building, they bulldozed the ACUs with it. They never could find it in all the junk. And so that was a big issue of getting that replaced. And Jonesboro also is an airport that needed it because of air service. Well, let me tell you, and Matt, you're going to get kind of a kick out of this because of your history. I want to give a big mention to Tyler Douglas. Tyler's at Southern Region headquarters. He's one of the ASOS focal points up there, but also the Memphis ET people. Guess what they thought about? Matt, you'll remember that we decommissioned the Boothville, Louisiana ASOS a number of years ago, and they had another AWOS down there, and that ACU went into a closet, apparently at New Orleans, and sat there. And one of the people at the Weather Service said, we've got one standing by instead of going to have to build a new one. And so, believe it or not, the ACU from Boothville, Louisiana was installed, and the OBS are now flowing for Jonesboro, Arkansas, effective today. And Ryan Vaughn, our friends up at KAIT, will appreciate that. We actually have weather OBS back at the airport there in Jonesboro today. So that's my one pick of the week. My second one is the big one that we've all read about, which just really pretty amazed by it, and that's the record high temperatures in Siberia. There we go. There goes the dust, the murder hornets, the locusts, the dust, and now the record high temperatures in Siberia. Those are my two picks of the week.
Wow. All right. Awesome. All right. Let's go to Kim. Kim, what is your pick of the week?
My pick is actually an article by a friend of the show, Marshall Shepard, writing in Forbes about the Saharan dust. And he makes the point that this isn't, an unusual catastrophe, seventh, horseman of the apocalypse or whatever people were making it out to be, but describes a little bit of its origins. So if you're interested in learning a little bit about the why behind this dust plume. And I'd understood, is it true that these dust plumes, when they do occur, especially when they're particularly strong, can help to suppress hurricane activity? Is that something? So let's keep our fingers crossed for as many of these as we can get just all year. It was great to skirt through severe weather season with as few events as, man, we've seen in a while. So let's try to get through hurricane season that way too.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, dust is not good for hurricane formation. So that's awesome. Yeah. All right, Tom, your time is up. What you got for us? Lay it on us.
I had two ready just in case somebody would take mine. Troy, you monster. I knew I was going to steal it. AccuWeather.com and pick the first thing on there. So my pick of the week is going to be the webinar that's going to take place that Climate Central is hosting on, if I can remember, the 24th. That would be Wednesday. It's going to be intensely interesting because it's going to be talking about extreme heat and how we establish good plans for extreme heat and how you address preparedness for heat waves. And I think that's so fantastically interesting because heat is this hidden killer that triggers many medical conditions. It's not easy to track. It's got 5 different variables that you can measure it with. And in the private sector, it's been all, personally, my clients have been talking about in the past week, whether it's the wet bulb globe temperature, whether it's the actual wet bulb temperature, a feels like temperature. There are so many different things. So I'm excited to see what Climate Central has to say about it and their good lineup of speakers. So that is my pick of the week.
My apologies,
Awesome.
Tom. Yeah.
I'll hold it against you forever, Troy.
All right, Shane, what you got for us? Go.
So I've kind of got 2, although one's not published as far as I can tell. But going back to the WIA and the 360 characters, that happened on June 17th. So I did find that email again. And also now they're available in Spanish. So if you've got the Spanish language activated on your phone, your WIA message will actually come across in Spanish. But my main pick, though, is from the International Association of Emergency Managers. And they've got a what they call IAM Strong, and it's really developed towards people who are in the thick of this pandemic and working nonstop and really getting together resources to help them mentally, physically. And it's only been going on for about 2 weeks so far. Each week they kind of release a new focus area. So, the first week was mindfulness. The second week was creativity. So it really gets into really good topics and makes you think about what's going on and how you can take care of yourself, because, emergency managers, public safety, and really anybody who public health, officials, we're really good about running ourselves into the ground. And so this is hopefully helping to counteract that a little bit.
Awesome. Good deal. We'll have it up on weatherbrains.com. Matt, what is your pick of the week?
My weather pick of the month is the derecho that went through Colorado and Wyoming.
Yeah.
I caught the tail end of that. I was in Red River, New Mexico, and we had some thunderstorms with grapple there, but wasn't involved in but that was an impressive event. But for my actual pick, I'm going to do some shameless plugging for the local office here. But I know earlier I talked about all the conversations in California about real-time alerting on fires. And if you have a situation like Paradise, what do you do? But our office has been involved in the experimental SMS text notification to partners when we detect fires on satellite. So we're using GOES imagery, and we can detect fires as small as, I would say, 5 to 10 acres. And we have alarms set up in our operations that we can actually trigger texts out to the partners that would probably be associated or would be handling that fire. And even this month, in a relatively low period, we've done 5 or 6 of those. We've had a high success rate on that, good feedback from partners. But back in October, we had about 3 weeks of Santa Ana wind setup for about 3 weeks, and we did 60 to 70 notifications during that period. I know Norman's doing it as well, and I know there's a couple other offices in the agency. So that's awesome.
Fantastic pick. All right, Bill Murray, go.
Yeah, and I'll take the foghorn, James, on the pick, just because I like to hear it, of course, and it'll make Matt feel comfortable to hear a foghorn.
What?
There you go. But I'll step in there and say I'm excited because next week we've got a hurricane hunter. As long as we clear the hurricane hunter's public affairs, Chris White got out a little ahead of it last night and tweeted that Captain Kelsey Carpenter was going to join us, and I bet it wasn't about 10 seconds till hurricane hunter's public affairs said, "Has this been cleared yet?" And I just deleted that Twitter account and just pretended like I didn't know anything about it. So hopefully they'll get that worked out, or we'll have one of those homegrown shows. But Jeff Garman's going to join us from the National Weather Service in Juneau on the 6th. And James, I'm sorry. Yeah, Matt, were you going to say something?
Jeff just got there.
I know. I'm
drive
excited.
up to Juneau.
That's going to be. I've enjoyed his beer of the week pick, whatever he's been having on his Twitter. That's been kind of cool. But we have a special musical guest that night.
Wow.
One of the greatest Southern rockers, Troy, you probably know, Jimmy Hall from Wet Willie. He's going to join us that night. They reached out over a weather forecast that we did a few weeks ago, and he's going to talk to us. That's going to be fun. And a really, really special guest panelist is going to be with us that night. Just kind of gives me chills to say this, but our friend Ken Carey is going to join us as a guest panelist that night.
That is great.
And I just think that's really huge that Ken has come back like he has. And I had a wonderful conversation with him last Tuesday night on Zoom, and it just was so wonderful to get back to that point. I didn't think I didn't know that I would ever get that opportunity again. Yeah. And so I'm really thankful for it. And so that night's going to be a really special night. So y'all come with your pajamas that night. We may be here late, James.
Well, I mean, this is really pretty amazing. I mean, when did WeatherBrains start getting musical guests on the show?
You see, on all these other weather podcasts, you don't get Wet Willie, I mean,
exactly.
Well, we figured we needed a little positive musical interlude. Keep on Smiling's his biggest song, and if he'll just break out that harmonica and just play a few bars of it, it'll make me feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, listen, we got to go here. Tom, Shane, Matt, thank you all so much for joining us. It's been a great show tonight. Thank you guys. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. We're going to do a triple, maybe a quad email segment next week with Aubrey. The show notes, picks of the week, weatherbrains.com. And that'll be it. We're typically here every Monday night at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless.
Bye, y'all. Thanks for a great show.
This was great, guys. Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thanks.
I didn't even realize, Shane, I had my ATL cup while the entire time I was drinking water from the